The shrill ring of my cell phone pierced the quiet of my office, shattering the calm of an ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I glanced at the caller ID, Memorial Hospital. My heart skipped a beat as I answered. "Mrs. Samantha Collins?" A crisp, professional voice inquired. "Yes, this is she," I replied, my fingers tightening around the phone. "I'm calling about your husband, Ethan Collins. There's been an accident." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. "What kind of accident? Is he okay?" "Ma'am, I'm afraid Mr. Collins has suffered severe injuries. He's currently unconscious and in critical condition. We need you to come to the hospital immediately." I don't remember hanging up or grabbing my purse. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. The 15-minute drive to Memorial felt like an eternity. As I burst through the emergency room doors, a nurse approached me. "Mrs. Collins?" I nodded, unable to form words. "Please follow me." She led me down a sterile hallway, the smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils. We stopped outside a room and she turned to face me. "Your husband is in there. The doctor will be with you shortly to explain his condition." I hesitated, my hand on the door handle. Taking a deep breath, I pushed it open. The sight that greeted me nearly brought me to my knees. Ethan lay motionless on the bed, tubes and wires snaking from his body to various machines. His face was swollen and bruised, barely recognizable. "Oh, Ethan," I whispered, approaching the bed. I reached out to touch his hand, careful not to disturb the IV. A knock at the door startled me. A tall man in a white coat entered, his expression grave. "Mrs. Collins, I'm Dr. Ramirez. I'm overseeing your husband's care." "What happened to him?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Ramirez sighed. "Mr. Collins was in a severe car accident. He suffered multiple fractures, internal bleeding, and I'm sorry to say there's a possibility of spinal cord damage." The room spun. I gripped the edge of Ethan's bed to steady myself. "Spinal cord damage? You mean he might be—" "Paralyzed, yes. We won't know the full extent until he regains consciousness." I closed my eyes, willing this nightmare to end. When I opened them, Dr. Ramirez was still there, his face etched with sympathy. "I know this is a lot to process," he said gently. "Is there anyone you'd like us to call for you?" I shook my head. "No, I'll make the calls myself. Thank you, doctor." As Dr. Ramirez left, a nurse entered carrying a clear plastic bag. "Mrs. Collins, these are your husband's personal effects from the accident." I took the bag, my fingers trembling. Inside were Ethan's watch, his wallet, and a small leather-bound book I'd never seen before. "What's this?" I murmured, pulling out the unfamiliar item. The nurse shrugged. It was in his briefcase. "Now, if you need anything, just press the call button." Left alone with my unconscious husband and this mysterious book, I sank into the chair beside the bed. The book was locked, a tiny key dangling from its spine. I turned it over in my hands, a strange feeling settling in my stomach. In all our years of marriage, Ethan had never mentioned keeping a diary. What secrets could be hidden within its pages? As I sat there, torn between respecting my husband's privacy and giving in to my growing curiosity, I had no idea that this little book would soon turn my world upside down. The Ethan I thought I knew was about to become a stranger, and the life we'd built together would crumble beneath the weight of the truths locked inside. I couldn't sleep that night. The image of Ethan's battered body haunted me, but it was the locked diary that truly kept me awake. By dawn, my resolve crumbled. With trembling hands, I retrieved the diary from my purse. The tiny key slid into the lock with a soft click. I hesitated, my conscience screaming at me to stop. But I had to know. I opened it. The first entry was dated 3 months ago. My eyes widened as I read, "Met Lily for lunch today. God, she's beautiful. I can't believe I'm falling for someone half my age, but I can't help myself. Samantha suspects nothing." My stomach churned. I flipped through the pages, each entry more damning than the last. Stolen moments, passionate encounters, all meticulously documented in Ethan's neat handwriting. Then I saw it. An entry from just last week. "Told Mom about Lily. She's surprisingly supportive. Says I deserve to be happy, even if it means leaving Samantha. We've started planning the divorce. It's time to tell Dad." The diary slipped from my fingers, landing with a dull thud on the floor. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Not only was Ethan cheating, but he was planning to leave me. And Linda, my mother-in-law, knew about it all along. The phone rang, startling me out of my shock. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Collins?" Your husband is showing signs of waking up. The doctor would like you to come in. I mumbled a response and hung up. How could I face him now? The man I thought I knew was a stranger to me. At the hospital, Dr. Ramirez met me outside Ethan's room. Mrs. Collins, I have some news, he said, his expression grave. We've completed more tests, and I'm afraid it's as we feared. There's significant damage to your husband's spinal cord. He's likely to be paralyzed from the waist down. I nodded numbly, unsure how to feel. Part of me wanted to cry for the man I'd loved for 20 years. Another part, the part that had read his betrayal in black and white, felt a twisted sense of justice. He's awake now, Dr. Ramirez continued. You can see him if you'd like. I steeled myself and entered the room. Ethan's eyes fluttered open as I approached the bed. Sam? He croaked, his voice weak. What happened? I looked at him, this man I thought I knew so well. The father of our children, the partner I'd built a life with. And now, a stranger. You were in an accident, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. You've been unconscious for 2 days. Confusion clouded his features. I can't feel my legs. I swallowed hard. The doctor says there's spinal cord damage. You might be paralyzed, Ethan. His face crumpled, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Sam, he whispered, reaching for my hand. I need you, now more than ever. I pulled away, my heart hardening. Do you? Because according to your diary, you were planning on leaving me for your young mistress. The color drained from his face. What? How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. I cut him off. What matters is that I do know. About Lily. About your plans for divorce. About your mother's involvement. Ethan's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. He looked like a fish out of water, gasping for air. Sam, please. He finally managed. I can explain. Save it, I snapped. I don't want to hear your excuses. I came here today to tell you one thing, Ethan. Our marriage is over. With that, I turned on my heel and walked out of the room, leaving my cheating, paralyzed husband behind. As I strode down the hospital corridor, I felt a strange mix of pain and liberation. The life I knew was over, but a new chapter was about to begin. And this time, I'd be writing it on my own terms. I barely made it to my car before the tears came. Sobs racked my body as I gripped the steering wheel, the full weight of Ethan's betrayal crashing down on me. How could he do this? How could Linda, the woman who'd called me daughter for 20 years, be complicit in this deception? A sharp rap on my window startled me. I looked up to see Thomas, Ethan's father, peering in with concern etched on his weathered face. I rolled down the window, hastily wiping my eyes. Samantha, dear, what's wrong? He asked, his voice gentle. We just arrived and saw you here. Is Ethan? He's awake, I managed, my voice hoarse. But Thomas, there's something you need to know. Before I could continue, Linda's shrill voice cut through the air. Thomas, what are you doing? We need to see Ethan. I watched as Linda hurried over, her perfectly coiffed hair bouncing with each step. The sight of her made my blood boil. How dare she act concerned when she'd been plotting behind my back? Samantha, Linda said, her tone saccharine sweet. How is our boy doing? I couldn't hold back anymore. Why don't you ask your accomplice, Linda? I spat. Both of them recoiled, shock evident on their faces. What are you talking about? Thomas asked, confusion clouding his features. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Ethan's been having an affair with a woman named Lily, and Linda here has known about it all along. The color drained from Linda's face. Thomas turned to his wife, disbelief written all over his face. Is this true? Linda's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I don't know what she's talking about, she stammered. But don't lie, Linda, I said, my voice ice cold. It's all in Ethan's diary, how you supported him, how you helped plan the divorce. Thomas stumbled back as if he'd been physically struck. Divorce? Linda, what have you done? Linda's facade crumbled. I was just trying to help our son be happy, she cried. Samantha doesn't understand him like Lily does. She's young, vibrant. She's half his age, I interjected, fury coursing through my veins. Thomas held up his hands, trying to calm the situation. Let's all take a breath. We need to talk to Ethan, get the full story. I shook my head. There's nothing more to discuss. I've told Ethan I want a divorce. Linda gasped. You can't. He needs you now more than ever. He's paralyzed, for God's sake. That doesn't erase what he's done, I said firmly. What you've both done. Thomas looked between us, his face a mask of pain and confusion. I can't believe this is happening, he muttered. Linda, how could you keep this from me? Linda reached for her husband, but he flinched away. Thomas, please, she begged. I was just trying to protect our family. By destroying it? He asked, his voice breaking. I couldn't bear to watch anymore. I started my car, the engine roaring to life. I'm going home, I announced. You two can deal with Ethan. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Thomas and Linda in my rearview mirror. They stood apart, the distance between them seeming insurmountable. A pang of sadness hit me, not just for my own shattered marriage, but for the collateral damage this betrayal had caused. At home, I poured myself a large glass of wine and sank into the couch. The house felt emptier than ever, filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. I pulled out my phone, my finger hovering over my best friend's number. But how could I explain this mess? Just then, a text came through. It was from an unknown number. Is this Samantha Collins? My name is Lily. We need to talk. My heart raced as I stared at the screen. Lily, the other woman, the reason my life had imploded. Did I dare respond? What more could she possibly have to say? With trembling fingers, I typed out a reply. Yes, this is Samantha. What could you possibly have to say to me? As I hit send, I realized that this conversation could change everything. Again. The next morning, I woke with a pounding headache and a hollow feeling in my chest. The events of the past few days felt like a bad dream, but the reality was inescapable. I had to face Ethan again to make my decision final. As I entered the hospital, I spotted Thomas sitting alone in the waiting area, his head in his hands. He looked up as I approached, his eyes red-rimmed and weary. Samantha, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know what to say. I sat beside him, feeling a mix of sympathy and anger. Where's Linda? He sighed heavily. With Ethan. We had a terrible fight last night. I can't believe she kept this from me all this time. Before I could respond, Dr. Ramirez approached us. Mrs. Collins, Mr. Collins, I have an update on Ethan's condition. We both stood, bracing ourselves for more bad news. The paralysis is permanent, Dr. Ramirez said gently. Ethan will need extensive rehabilitation and lifelong care. The words hit me like a physical blow. Despite everything, a part of me had hoped for a miracle. Now that hope was gone. Thomas placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. What do we do now, doctor? We'll start him on a rehabilitation program as soon as possible. But he'll need a strong support system at home, Dr. Ramirez explained, his eyes flickering between Thomas and me. I felt a surge of anger. Why should I be responsible for the man who betrayed me? But guilt quickly followed. How could I abandon him in his time of need? I need to see him, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. As I entered Ethan's room, Linda shot me a venomous glare before storming out. Ethan lay there, looking small and vulnerable in the hospital bed. Sam, he croaked, reaching for my hand. I'm so sorry, for everything. I stood just out of his reach, my heart racing. Sorry doesn't fix this, Ethan. His face crumpled. I know, but please, I need you. The doctor says I'll never walk again. I know, I said, fighting to keep my voice even. But that doesn't change what you did, what you were planning to do. Tears streamed down Ethan's face, and I made a terrible mistake. I see that now. Please, Sam, give me another chance. I love you. For a moment I wavered. The man I had loved for 20 years was lying before me, broken and pleading. But then I remembered the diary entries, the cold calculation of his betrayal. No, I said firmly, I won't be manipulated anymore. I'm filing for divorce, Ethan. It's over. His eyes widened in panic. You can't. What about our vows, in sickness and in health? You broke those vows long before this accident, I retorted. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. As I turned to leave, Ethan called out desperately. What about Lily? Have you heard from her? I froze, my hand on the doorknob. As a matter of fact, I have, I said, not turning around. She reached out to me last night. What? Ethan gasped. What did she say? I finally faced him, seeing the fear in his eyes. That's between me and her. Goodbye, Ethan. As I walked out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The decision was made. There was no going back. In the hallway, I found Thomas and Linda in a heated argument. How could you do this to our family? Thomas was saying, his voice thick with emotion. Linda spotted me and pointed accusingly. This is all your fault. If you had been a better wife. Enough, I shouted, surprising even myself. I'm done with your manipulations, Linda. I'm filing for divorce, and there's nothing you can do about it. Thomas looked at me with a mix of sadness and understanding. Samantha, I'm so sorry for everything. Is there anything I can do? I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what came next. Actually, there is. I need a good lawyer. Can you recommend someone? As Thomas nodded, I saw Linda's face contort with rage. But I didn't care anymore. I was taking control of my life, and nothing was going to stop me. Walking out of the hospital, I pulled out my phone. It was time to respond to Lily's message. Whatever she had to say, I was ready to hear it. The truth, no matter how painful, was always better than lies. I sat in the hospital cafeteria, my hands trembling as I stared at my phone. Lily's number glowed on the screen, a silent challenge. Taking a deep breath, I pressed call. Hello? A young, hesitant voice answered. Lily, it's Samantha, Ethan's wife. There was a sharp intake of breath. Mrs. Collins, I'm so sorry. Save it, I snapped. I want answers, and I want them now. Lily's voice quivered. Of course, what do you want to know? Everything, I said, starting with how long this affair has been going on. As Lily spilled the sordid details of her relationship with Ethan, my anger grew. 6 months of lies, of sneaking around behind my back, 6 months of planning to destroy our marriage. And Linda knew? I asked, my voice ice cold. Yes, Lily admitted. She encouraged Ethan, said he deserved to be happy. I laughed bitterly. And what about my happiness? Did anyone consider that? Before Lily could respond, I heard a commotion behind me. I turned to see Linda storming towards me, her face contorted with rage. Who are you talking to? She demanded. I ended the call and stood to face her. That was Lily. You remember her, don't you, Linda? The woman you encouraged your son to cheat with? Linda's eyes widened in shock. How dare you? No, how dare you? I shouted, not caring who heard. You knew about this affair for months. You helped plan it. How could you do this to me? Thomas appeared behind Linda, his face a mask of confusion. What's going on? I pulled out Ethan's diary from my bag. Why don't you ask your wife, Thomas? Or better yet, read it for yourself. I thrust the diary into Thomas's hands. He opened it, his eyes scanning the pages. With each passing moment, the color drained from his face. Linda, he whispered, looking up at his wife in disbelief. Is this true? Linda's defiance crumbled. I was just trying to help our son. By destroying our family? Thomas's voice cracked with emotion. I turned to Linda, my anger reaching its boiling point. You claim to care about family, but you were willing to tear mine apart. Well, congratulations, Linda. You've succeeded. I'm divorcing Ethan, and I'm taking him for everything he's worth. Linda lunged at me, her hands clawing at the air. You vindictive bitch, he's paralyzed, he needs us. Thomas grabbed Linda, holding her back. That's enough, he roared. The cafeteria had gone silent, all eyes on our family drama. I felt a strange calm settle over me. I'm done, I said quietly. Done with the lies, done with the manipulation. I'm going to see my lawyer now. Don't try to stop me. As I turned to leave, Thomas called out, Samantha, wait. I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I paused, looking back at him. I know, Thomas. You're as much a victim in this as I am. Linda broke free from Thomas's grip. You can't do this. Think of Ethan. I met her gaze steadily. I am thinking of Ethan. I'm thinking of how he planned to discard me like yesterday's trash. Well, now he can live with the consequences of his actions. With that, I walked out of the cafeteria, leaving chaos in my wake. As I reached my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Lily. There's more you need to know. Can we meet? I stared at the message, my mind racing. Did I want to know more? Could the situation possibly get any worse? After a moment's hesitation, I typed back, where and when. As I hit send, I realized I was at a crossroads. Whatever Lily had to tell me could change everything. But I was done being a victim. It was time to take control of my narrative, no matter where it led me. I started the car, a new determination coursing through me. The old Samantha might have crumbled under the weight of this betrayal. But the new Samantha? She was ready for war. I met Lily at a small cafe across town, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and anticipation. She was younger than I'd imagined, barely out of college. As I sat down, I saw fear in her eyes. Mrs. Collins, Samantha, I interrupted. Let's skip the pleasantries. What more do I need to know? Lily took a deep breath. Ethan, he wasn't just planning to leave you. He was embezzling from the company. He promised to split the money with me if I helped him. The world tilted on its axis. What? It's true, Lily continued, her voice shaking. He's been siphoning funds for months. That's why he was so eager to leave. He was afraid of getting caught. I felt sick. Not only had Ethan betrayed our marriage, but he was also a criminal. Do you have proof? Lily nodded, sliding a USB drive across the table. Everything's here. Account numbers, transactions, everything. I pocketed the drive, my mind racing. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm scared, Lily admitted. With Ethan in the hospital, I don't know what to do. And I'm pregnant. The final blow. I stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over my chair. I need to go. As I drove home, my emotions warred within me. Anger, betrayal, and now a fierce determination. Ethan wouldn't get away with this. The next morning, I marched into my lawyer's office, armed with the USB drive and a steely resolve. Sandra, I said, handing her the drive, I need you to look at this. It's evidence of Ethan's embezzlement. My lawyer's eyes widened as she reviewed the files. Samantha, this is serious. We need to report this to the authorities. Do it, I said without hesitation. And I want to push for full financial disclosure in the divorce proceedings. I want everything. Sandra nodded, a glint of admiration in her eyes. We'll nail him to the wall. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. The police launched an investigation into Ethan's financial dealings. His company suspended him, pending the outcome. And through it all, I stood firm in my decision to divorce him. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, my doorbell rang. It was Thomas, looking haggard and defeated. Samantha, he said, his voice hoarse. I don't know where else to go. Linda's left me. She's moved in with Ethan to care for him. I feel like I've lost everything. My heart softened slightly. Come in, Thomas. You look like you could use a meal. Over dinner, Thomas poured out his heart. I can't believe Linda kept all this from me. The affair, the embezzlement. How could I have been so blind? I reached across the table, squeezing his hand. We were both blind, Thomas, but now we see clearly. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from Sandra. Police are moving to arrest Ethan tomorrow. Be prepared for fallout. I showed Thomas the message, watching as the last bit of hope drained from his face. What are you going to do? He asked. I'm going to be there, I said, my voice steady. I want to see his face when they take him away. The next morning, I stood outside Ethan's hospital room as 2 police officers entered. I could hear Linda's shrill protests, Ethan's panicked denials, and then silence as they read him his rights. As they wheeled Ethan out in handcuffs, our eyes met. I saw a flicker of the man I once loved, now consumed by fear and shame. Sam, he pleaded, please don't do this. I'll make it right, I promise. I looked at him, feeling a strange mix of pity and resolve. You've made your choices, Ethan. Now face the consequences. As they took him away, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, but I knew this was just the beginning. The real battle for my future, my independence, my very identity, was just starting. I turned to Thomas, who stood beside me, shell-shocked. Are you ready for what comes next? I asked. He nodded slowly. I think so. But Samantha, what about you? How will you move forward from this? I squared my shoulders, a fierce determination burning in my chest. One day at a time, Thomas, but make no mistake, I'm not just moving forward, I'm rising from the ashes. The courtroom buzzed with tension as I took my seat, my lawyer Sandra by my side. Across the aisle, Ethan sat in his wheelchair, Linda hovering protectively nearby. The sight of them together still made my blood boil, but I forced myself to remain calm. Today was about justice, not revenge. As the judge entered, a hush fell over the room. This was it, the culmination of months of legal battles, emotional turmoil, and shocking revelations. All rise, the bailiff called out. The proceedings began, and I listened with a mix of detachment and intense focus as our lawyers presented their cases. Sandra was brilliant, methodically laying out Ethan's infidelity, his embezzlement, and the extent of his deceit. When it was Ethan's turn to testify, he wheeled himself to the stand, his face a mask of contrition. Your Honor, he began, his voice trembling, I made terrible mistakes, but I am a changed man now. This accident, it's shown me what's truly important in life. I gripped the edge of my seat, fighting the urge to scoff. Even now, he was trying to manipulate the situation. And what about the embezzlement, Mr. Collins? The judge asked sternly. Ethan's facade cracked. I was desperate. I thought I could make it right before anyone found out. The judge's eyes narrowed. And Miss Samantha Collins? Did you think about making it right with her? Ethan's gaze found mine across the courtroom. Sam, he pleaded. "I know I hurt you, but please don't take everything from me. I'm already paying for my mistakes." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the love we once shared, but then I remembered the diary entries, the cold calculation of his betrayal. My resolve hardened. "Your Honor," I said, standing up, "may I address the court?" The judge nodded, and I walked to the front, my heart pounding. "Ethan talks about paying for his mistakes," I began, my voice steady. "But the truth is, he was planning to leave me with nothing. He and Lily were going to take the embezzled money and start a new life, leaving me behind like yesterday's trash." I turned to face Ethan directly. "You didn't just betray our marriage vows. You betrayed my trust, my love, and our entire life together. And now you have the audacity to ask for mercy?" Ethan's face crumpled, but I wasn't finished. "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice. I want what's rightfully mine, the life and security that Ethan tried to steal from me." As I returned to my seat, I caught sight of Thomas in the back of the courtroom. He gave me a small nod of encouragement, and I felt a surge of strength. The judge called a recess to consider her decision. The wait was agonizing, but finally, we were called back in. "In light of the evidence presented," the judge began, "this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Samantha Collins." Relief washed over me as she continued, outlining the terms of the divorce settlement and the substantial alimony I would receive. Ethan's face grew paler with each pronouncement. "Furthermore," the judge added, "the court recommends a full investigation into Mr. Collins' financial dealings with potential criminal charges to follow." As the gavel came down, finalizing the judgment, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, vindication, but also a deep sadness for the life I had lost. Linda rushed to Ethan's side, shooting me a venomous glare. "Are you happy now?" she spat. "You've ruined him." I met her gaze steadily. "No, Linda, Ethan ruined himself, and you helped him do it." As I turned to leave, I saw Lily slip into the courtroom. Our eyes met, and I saw a mixture of fear and regret in hers. She approached hesitantly. "Samantha," she said softly, I'm so sorry for everything." I looked at her, this young woman who had played a part in destroying my life. But as I opened my mouth to respond, I realized I felt no anger towards her anymore. Only pity. "Take care of yourself, Lily," I said simply, "and your baby." As I walked out of the courtroom, head held high, I felt like I could finally breathe again. The battle was over, but a new challenge lay ahead. Rebuilding my life on my own terms. It was daunting, but for the first time in months, I felt ready to face whatever came next. 6 months after the divorce, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the broken, betrayed wife. In her place stood a confident, self-assured woman ready to take on the world. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my reverie. It was Thomas, looking more relaxed than I'd seen him in months. "Samantha," he greeted me warmly. "You look fantastic. Ready for your big day?" I nodded, excitement bubbling up inside me, as ready as I'll ever be. Today marked the grand opening of my new business venture, a support center for women rebuilding their lives after divorce. It was a dream I never knew I had until life forced me to reinvent myself. As we drove to the center, Thomas filled me in on the latest family drama. Linda's still with Ethan, but it's not going well. His embezzlement trial is next month, and she's starting to realize the mess she's in. I felt a twinge of sympathy, quickly replaced by resolve. They made their choices, Thomas, just like I made mine. Arriving at the center, I was overwhelmed by the turnout. Women of all ages filled the space, their faces a mix of hope and uncertainty, expressions I knew all too well. As I prepared to give my opening speech, I caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Lily, her belly now swollen with pregnancy, gave me a hesitant smile. I nodded back, a silent acknowledgement of our shared history and the unexpected turns life can take. Taking a deep breath, I stepped up to the podium. "Welcome, everyone. 6 months ago, I stood where many of you are standing now, lost, betrayed, unsure of my future. But today, I stand before you as living proof that there is life after betrayal, after heartbreak, after having your world turned upside down." As I spoke, I saw heads nodding, tears being wiped away. These women understood, in a way no one else could, the journey I'd been through. "This center is more than just a business for me," I continued. "It's a promise that we are not defined by the actions of others, but by our own strength and resilience. Together, we will rebuild, reinvent, and thrive. The applause that followed was deafening. As I mingled with the attendees afterward, I was struck by their stories, each unique, yet bound by a common thread of survival and hope. Later that evening, as I locked up the center, I felt a presence behind me. Turning, I found myself face to face with Ethan, in his wheelchair, Linda hovering nearby. "Sam," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I saw the news about your center. I wanted to say congratulations." I studied him, noticing the lines of stress etched on his face, the defeat in his eyes. For a moment, I felt a flicker of the love we once shared. But it was just that, a flicker, quickly extinguished by the memory of his betrayal. "Thank you, Ethan," I replied coolly. "Is there something you need?" He hesitated, glancing at Linda before continuing. "I wanted to apologize. For everything. What I did to you. It was unforgivable." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of our shared history. "You're right, it was unforgivable, but I've forgiven you anyway." His eyes widened in surprise. "You have?" I nodded. "Not for you, Ethan. For me. Holding on to that anger was poisoning me. Letting it go, that's how I've been able to move forward." Tears welled up in his eyes. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." "No, you don't," I agreed. "But that's not the point. I'm not the same woman you betrayed, Ethan. I'm stronger now, happier, and I have you to thank for that in a twisted way." As I turned to leave, Linda stepped forward. "Samantha, I'm sorry too, for everything." I looked at her, this woman who had once been like a second mother to me. "I hope you both find peace," I said simply. Walking away, I felt a profound sense of closure. The chapter of my life with Ethan was truly over. But a new one, filled with possibility and purpose, was just beginning. As I drove home, I thought about the women I'd met today, the lives I hoped to touch through my center. I thought about Thomas, finding his own path to healing. About Lily, facing an uncertain future with courage. And I thought about myself, Samantha Collins, no longer defined by her marriage or her betrayal, but by her own strength and resilience. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see where it would lead. After all, the best revenge isn't just living well. It's thriving on your